All right, welcome everyone. Welcome again to another edition of our Fashioning Sustainability Seminar here in the Program on the Environment at the University of Washington. This is actually week 4 of our seminar series. If you've missed any of our previous seminars, please check them out on our YouTube channel. You should also subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the little notifications icon, and you will be notified the next time that we stream live. As I said, this is the Fashioning Sustainability Seminar Series. I am one half of your co-host duo. My name is Sean McDonald, and I'm a faculty member here in the Program on the Environment. My other half, Eli Wheat. You want to say hello, Eli?
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you can join us on this sunny day.
Fantastic. Well, as you may know, this seminar series is really focusing in on issues of sustainability in fashion, apparel, and textiles and the like. We have a fantastic speaker with us today, Landon Nash, who's the CEO of Tact Stone. It's a sustainable men's fashion brand. And he's going to talk with us on the topic of small manufacturers, designers, and commitments to sustainability, the Tact Stone experience specifically. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to start off with an acknowledgement of the land. I'd like to begin by saying that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish people of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of the tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. While we meet today on this virtual platform here on Zoom and YouTube land, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home, wherever we are. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and stewardship of the lands, and to improving our own understanding of local indigenous peoples and their cultures. So, y'all, as I said, we've got a great speaker with us today, Landon Nash. I just want to give you a little bit of a flavor of who Landon Nash is, and then I will turn it over to him. So Landon Nash is the CEO of Tact Stone. As I mentioned, Landon doesn't actually come from the fashion industry. That's not his roots. He was actually a real estate agent prior to launching Tact Stone. So his story is really an interesting one, I think, for all of us. His interest in fashion was sparked when he came across an article about the fashion industry and how wasteful it is and how much it contributes to climate change, among other environmental concerns. Having a personal interest in sustainability and realizing that his own decisions were contributing to the problem through his consumption of fashion and apparel, he sort of took the bull by the horns and went out and started looking for a brand that he could feel comfortable wearing and buying from. But unfortunately, there were a limited number of options at his disposal. So he did what any good entrepreneur would do, and he set out to build the company that he wanted. And that's how Tact Stone was born. So with a focus on circular and regenerative practices, Tact Stone assembled a supply chain and with contributors that focused on the goal of sourcing the lowest impact materials with the highest performance characteristics. So today, Landon will provide his perspective on the opportunities and the challenges of developing a brand and establishing that brand while staying true to those values of social and environmental sustainability. And not only that, he's done all of this during the time of COVID. So he has an even more interesting story, I think, to share with us all. So before I turn it over to Landon, I just want to remind everyone that if you're here on the Zoom, we're gonna have some brief remarks from Landon. And then if you have questions, if you're in the Zoom, please raise your digital hand and we'll call on you. You can turn on your camera and ask those questions. If you don't feel comfortable that way, you can always chat your questions to us as well. If you're joining us from YouTube, you can add your questions via chat and we'll make sure that those get answered in some way, shape, or form. So without further ado, I want to just go ahead and give Landon a big round of digital applause. Folks here in the Zoom and online, please go ahead and do that. Thank you so much. Landon Nash, thank you so much for joining us, Landon. I'll turn it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I forgot the thing we decided on. I'm going to also start a poll question for folks on the Zoom. So students in the Zoom, please go ahead and address the poll question that I'm putting up, or poll questions rather, that I'm putting up now. And then Landon, I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to you.
No worries. Sean, Eli, thanks so much for having me here. It's an honor to be a part of this, and I'm excited to tell my story and Tact Stone's story a little bit, and hopefully inspire you guys in a way, and just have an open conversation around sustainability within the apparel industry. Sean, that was a very great introduction, and took some of my talking points, but I'll kind of go a little bit deeper. But as Sean said, prior to starting Tact Stone, I was never in the fashion industry. I was a real estate agent in San Francisco. Was very happy, had no intention of getting out. But I happened across an article about the industry, how wasteful it is, how much it contributes to climate change, and it just absolutely blew my mind. Stats that I was not aware of, and just how impactful the industry is, how much it takes from our planet, and also, I think there's another side of sustainability that is not talked about as often, is this idea of social sustainability and the way that the garment workers are treated, and the communities in which a lot of the garments are made, and the detriment that it has in those areas as well. So when I came across that article, I really started diving in and trying to understand a bit more about the industry and where the issues were, and if there was anybody doing anything about it. And as Sean said, there was very few. I think everybody can look at Patagonia as kind of the North Star of responsibility. And there was another brand at the time called Outer Known, which I felt had some good strategies towards sustainability. And as much as I tried to keep my purchases to those two companies, I was a city boy. And so an outdoor company and a surf brand didn't really offer me the everyday style that I needed to or wanted for my everyday life, for work, for going out with friends. And so that's what was really the genesis of looking into Tact Stone. And trying to get started looking at how to start an apparel brand is incredibly difficult. You can't Google supply chain or Google how to reduce impact in the apparel industry. And so I really just started diving in and trying to figure out what sustainability really meant within this industry. And I think that is something that's still not fully defined. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the talk, because I think it is one thing that we need to address as an industry. But the first thing I did was try to learn. And I ended up meeting one of the global leaders in sustainable textile innovation, and told him what I was thinking around a brand and this idea of 100% sustainability, even though I didn't know what that really meant yet. But they were hugely helpful in helping me come up with my own definition of sustainability. And also was very helpful in making introductions to the supply chain. These supply chain partners aren't out there marketing themselves. And so trying to sift through and figure out not only where you source your fabric from, but where you send it to get cut and sewn, trying to figure out the certifications for ethical practices, for sustainable materials. And it took about 2 years of research to figure out how to build this company in a way that I felt was going to have a positive impact and have the potential to change the paradigm in the apparel industry and how things are currently done. So as I was going through this, I think the first thing that I needed to do, and I strongly urge other entrepreneurs that are thinking about sustainability in apparel, is coming up with their definition of sustainability. There's not a consensus in the industry. If you talk to a number of companies, a number of brands, a number of people, definitions vary. And so there's a number of people that think natural materials are sustainable. In my opinion, not so much. Conventional cotton has a litany of its own issues through pesticide and insecticide use. I think it's something like 1/4 of the world's pesticides are used in the cotton industry, which destroy the soil, which means more water is needed to cultivate that crop, which means cotton farmers are dying from disease and cancer from exposure to these pesticides. And so I think that was the biggest thing in getting started, is coming up with my definition of sustainability. And I wanted to take a hard stand and stick a stake in the ground around what sustainability meant to me. And so my definition was organic or recycled materials only. No conventional cotton, no virgin synthetics. I even consider bamboo a questionable material because of the chemicals that are needed to break down that fiber into application in the textile industry. And so I kind of put a box around the materials that we were willing to consider working with. And then from there, you have to start going into the product and understand how these materials can be used, their application, and then how you figure out to put those into the application for a product. And so at this point, we are only working with organic cotton, hemp, upcycled or recycled cotton, recycled polyester, and we have one piece with sustainably sourced and ethically sourced alpaca wool. And we felt that that was a good place for us to start to source our materials. When I talk about Tact Stone, I think there's a number of distinctions with our brand versus really any other brands that are out there. One is our 100% commitment to sustainable materials, like I just mentioned. We will never use, even 2% spandex for stretch. We felt like someone just needed to put a stake in the ground and say, we can make the highest quality product without making any of these sacrifices. Second is 100% commitment to ethical manufacturing. So that means vetting our production partners, not just cut and sew, but where we source our materials from. And there's certifications that we stand by. And if people have questions on those certifications, I don't want to just rattle off a number of organizations, but you can feel free to reach out to me afterwards. But we also have traveled and visited every single one of our production partners to make sure that they're doing what they're saying. And I think that that's a piece that's hugely important, to make sure that we're not taking advantage of people and communities in which garments are made. And then I think the third thing is trying to bring true and authentic sustainability into the fashion world. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the brands that do communicate around sustainability tend to be more of the outdoor aesthetic. And I felt that there's a large population of people that might not be outdoors every day that still want to have a positive impact through the fashion and the clothing that they purchase. And then I think the last one that is not as apparent looking at our site is innovating on a material level. It would have been a lot easier to start our brand with a large majority of our product being organic cotton. Organic cotton is pretty widely available and obviously has a huge number of applications, but we wanted to move as far as we could from an innovation standpoint in bringing materials like upcycled or recycled cotton to the forefront. In our opinion, it's one of the most sustainable materials you can use, right? You're not sourcing from the planet, you're taking discarded either garments or cutting scraps from the manufacturing floor and turning it into a new, beautiful product. And so that was something that we were committed to from the beginning and are committed to through the life of our company, is to continue to innovate, to continue to bring these material innovations to the market. And just for an example, the woven shirt that I'm wearing right now, or Oxford, we were the first to put upcycled cotton yarn into a weave. And that took us about 6 months of R&D with our manufacturer out in Portugal on how to achieve that and get recycled cotton into a weave. And the issue with recycled cotton is that the staple fiber ends up getting shorter. If you think about, the normal cotton yarn, let's just call it that, as you recycle it, turn it into new yarn, the staple fiber gets shorter. So it gets a little bit harder to work with. But it's worth, I think, the stress and the testing to continue to push this message and to continue to innovate and bring these type of products to the market. So that was kind of what I thought about as I was starting the brand, and wanted to really have a platform to empower the customer to feel good about their purchases and feel like they're not sacrificing anything from a quality standpoint or a style standpoint. Now, as we continue to move forward, I think there's other issues in the industry outside of just materials and ethical factories. I think the business model as a whole, especially with the prevalence of fast fashion, is broken. The model is, I'm going to produce a ton of product. I'm going to hope to sell as much as I can. Whatever I can't sell, I'm going to put on deep discount. Or it doesn't get sold and that goes to landfill. And we are hoping to be a leader in a new way for fashion. We are actively, actually just had a conversation this week with a group that's trying to make on-demand manufacturing more prevalent, so that we can produce to our demand rather than guess. And I think it's a huge next step in reducing the impact that the industry has as a whole, and is a next step towards circularity. And this idea of circularity is something that I am incredibly passionate about, and something that I've built into the foundation of the brand from the get-go. So every product that we have designed thus far and every product that we will continue to design is designed to go back into the system and not into landfill, and get turned into another product. It's a little bit buried in our site at the moment. We don't have a ton of marketing around it just yet, just being a small brand. And, one, we don't have product in the market long enough to where it makes sense for customers to send it back. I guess just some context, we launched in late 2019, so just before the pandemic. So we're not even 2 years old yet. But that is in our roadmap, and that's something that we're absolutely committed to, is being able to engage with our customers to return the garments when they're either broken down years after wearing them, or when they're ready to just exchange into a new style. And rather than throwing it away or donating it to Goodwill, as good as the intention is, I think it's something like only 10% of garments that are donated to Goodwill actually get used, and the rest end up in landfill. And so we want to actively control our waste stream, and we have the supply chain partners that are able to take garments, grind them down, and turn them into new product. And we believe that that's necessary from an environmental standpoint, but we also believe that that's the next big thing in the apparel industry, and something that we hope to be a pioneer for. That is kind of a high level idea of kind of what I thought about as building the company, and something that we are proud of. And again, we're small, but we have big visions, and we don't see any reason why we can't be, the next big brand in apparel. And we've built the foundation to allow us to scale without ever having to sacrifice our ethos. And that's something that we're committed to. And the reason that we spent, 2 years developing the brand prior to launch, and why we spent the first 2 years continuing to hone our supply chain, our material sourcing, our product development, and haven't spent a ton of money yet on marketing and acquisition. We really wanted to build this company in a much different way, to have a positive impact and to empower the customer to feel good about purchasing from Tact Stone. We want the customer to internalize that feeling of doing good and giving back to the planet and to people. And I guess one other thing is we try to quantify all of our impact reduction. So we have third-party life cycle assessments that are done on all the materials that we use so that we can measure and track the impact that we're having. And so if you do go on our website and you look on the product pages, we actively communicate our water savings. And we started with that because we felt like it was more digestible on the consumer's level. I think most people can conceptualize what a gallon of water is rather than what a pound of CO2 is. That being said, we do track all of our impact reduction and something that we plan on sharing a lot more with our customers. So I think I'll pause there, Sean. I think that's a decent background, but is there anything that you want me to dive into a little bit deeper?
Lennon, thank you so much for that introduction. Oh, Eli.
I think that was awesome. And the students have collected a bunch of really great questions for you. And I could dive into them if you feel ready for that, Sean. Can I do that? And students, you may have new questions that are coming up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is to share the poll because that was something that we, so I could share those poll results. And Lennon, if you don't mind stepping us through these, because I know that these questions were actually fairly important to you as you started thinking about developing your thoughts around sustainable fashion.
Yeah. Sure. So the first one, on average, how many gallons of water does it take to produce one conventional cotton t-shirt? The answer is 750 gallons. And this is one of the stats that was highlighted in the first article. Actually, all of these poll questions were stats that were highlighted in the article that really opened my eyes to the industry. And I think that this is, it's an important part of the conversation. I think we are so used to clothing, right? We are, from the time we are born, we're put in clothes. And I think most people don't think about where clothes come from and the fact that everything that we wear comes from the planet in one way or another. And up until a couple years ago, I didn't think about it, right? And so to think about 750 gallons of water to make one cotton t-shirt, it just blew my mind. I mean, that's enough drinking water for one person, I think for 2 years. And to just put it in that context just absolutely blew my mind. And and so if you look at some of the garments that we produce, specifically our upcycled cotton t-shirt, that t-shirt saves 538 gallons of water because of the materials that we're using, because it's 50% upcycled cotton. So we're not sourcing anything new. We're taking scraps from the cutting floor, turning it into a new product, which, I think is such a beautiful thing. And, another stat that is, pretty crazy to me is that just using organic cotton versus conventional cotton saves 90% of water usage at the farming level. The reason being that all the pesticides destroy the soil, which means that it doesn't use the water efficiently for the crop. And so just by going organic, you're saving 90% of water usage on the farming level. So on to number 2, on average, how much clothing is sent to landfill each year in the US? The answer is 10 million tons. I think it's a truckload of clothing waste goes to landfill every second. And I think speaks to this idea of fast fashion and the overconsumption, right? We buy the cheapest product that we can to fulfill that need of something new. And because it's cheaply made, it usually doesn't last very long. And again, I think is one of the biggest problems that we're facing as an industry is this overconsumption. And I'm as much as I care about and I'm passionate about sustainability. I'm also a realist. I understand that people like to buy things and like to have new things. And I think that that's okay. But what I hope to do with Tact and Stone and my brand is enable that, the customer, enable you guys to make a smarter decision. Sorry, I've got some sirens. Beauty of living in a city. But the idea is to enable you to make decisions that have a much lower impact. And as I was talking about with the circularity, we hope to really significantly cut into this number, at least through our own brand, and to start, getting this waste out of our landfills and allowing nature to be nature. You guys are good. What percentage of clothing produced every year doesn't get sold? 30%. So I commend you guys, and in your class, you guys obviously know what you're talking about. But all of these things just absolutely blew my mind. The fact that 30% of clothing is not sold is just insane. And with the kind of the more traditional industry, these clothes go to waste, and they, go to landfill. And that is something that we are going to combat, as I mentioned, with producing for the demand, not producing on a guess, and hoping to sell as much as we can. So yeah, well, you guys are on it.
Well, thank you for that. So I think we should probably get into questions then, Eli. Yeah.
I love that. I have lined up some questions. I'm actually having a really hard time choosing. Students, you are doing such a good job with these questions that you're coming up with for our speakers. They're all really, really great. And maybe I'll just start with one kind of a big question, and then there's a micro question that I really hope we get to. So the big question, and actually a lot of students are curious if you have plans to open, because it seems like a lot of your products are sort of detailed sort of toward male consumers or male identified consumers. I'm just curious if a lot of students are asking if you plan on diversifying that around gender. So that's one question, but I don't want to start there. Sure. You can answer that one in a second. The question I kind of want to start with is just if you think, you've obviously thought a lot about the industry, thought a lot about fashion. What would be the single most important thing that could be done to move the industry forward in terms of building deeper connections with real sustainability?
That is a big question, and I don't know that I have the right answer. I think I have an opinion. I think this idea of sustainability, I don't think is going to be driven by one person or one brand. I think it's going to be a collaboration between larger brands, smaller brands, consumer demand. One of the reasons that I actually was comfortable starting Tact and Stone is I learned that all of the big existing fashion houses are extremely interested in sustainability and doing something about it, but have an incredibly difficult job to do that, backing it into an existing supply chain, an existing price point, an existing margin. And their supply chains are so complex. A lot of the time, they don't even know where their clothes are getting made. And so that's why I said, there's an opportunity for someone to build it right from the get-go. For the industry as a whole, I think the lowest hanging fruit is converting to organic cotton. It's becoming more prevalent. It's a lot more widely available. And anyone that can start to convert their conventional cotton to organic cotton, I think will have a significant impact if you're talking about the industry as a whole. And what I think could be done sooner rather than later. I think the biggest idea, and I think what needs to happen to really have a significant impact on our environmental impact, is reducing waste and thinking about the end of life. That is why we're focused on circularity. I think it's the biggest issue, and I think is something that as an industry we need to figure out. And look, no matter how big Tact Stone gets, we can't do it alone. And so I think as an industry we need to really prioritize materials and end of life. And then I think, Eli, if you just want me to answer your other question about male versus female, not coming from this industry prior to starting Tact Stone, I knew men's clothing. And I also, so one, it was easier for me to conceptualize around the brand and the product that we wanted to produce. But secondly, I also felt like there was a bigger hole in the menswear market when it came to sustainability compared to women's. I mean, there are some good women's brands that are focused on sustainability that are doing good work. I think the most well-known is the Reformation. They were, a brand that really, I think, nailed the communication, but for the most part, had a pretty strong sustainability strategy. There's other brands like Amour Vert that has a decent sustainability strategy. Outer Known has added a women's line, and I felt like there was a bigger hole in menswear, and that no one was really taking a real stab at it in menswear. And so that was part of the reason that we started the way that we have and focused on menswear. That being said, the absolute goal is to include everyone. To produce women's clothes, to produce unisex clothes, gender neutral, I think is absolutely within our roadmap and something that we want to do. But we need to get market share and start building our business first before we get to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Landon. I'm really curious about this. The scale question is just really intriguing to me. You have said, maybe you also said this when we first met and chatted a long time ago, you were talking about, scale, and like, it isn't your goal to necessarily maintain yourself as sort of a small, like a tiny business. And I just wonder if you can speak a little bit to that. And like, I notice a mistrust in myself around bigness. And I'm just curious, I don't know where that comes from necessarily. I can examine that, but I'm just curious if you've run into that in other people, like, or even in yourself as you think about what, is there a place where big might get too big for you to be able to really keep an eye on all the pieces of the complex system you're trying to organize and navigate?
I think it's a phenomenal question. It's something that I have evaluated and thought about from the beginning. I think I have some of the same feelings as you, as big can be bad or big is bad. And I think that's a product of just how industries have worked. I think we're getting to a point where environmental stewardship and responsibility is becoming more prevalent and more widely thought about. And that hasn't been the case. And so naturally, all of the big corporations have not thought about this before and are now scrambling to figure out a corporate social responsibility and sustainability strategy. And in my opinion, a lot of it is just marketing and greenwashing so that they don't look so bad. With regards to Tact Stone and our plans, I think ideally we would like to be huge. And I don't see that as a bad thing. And the reason I don't see it as a bad thing is because we've built the company the right way from the beginning. This is our strategy. Our strategy is to make innovative product with the lowest impact materials that are available to us, and to scale that. And the way that I look at it is people are going to buy stuff and buy clothing for as long as I can think into the future. We all need clothing. If I can start taking some of the purchases from the brands that are not doing good, we're going to have a positive impact. And if we're selling 100 million garments a year that are all sustainably made, I think that's a positive thing. And I think that we are able to hopefully circumvent that idea that big is bad. I mean, look at Patagonia. They are big. They're a $1 billion company. And they use their platform not only to produce sustainable products, but to use their platform for awareness, to invest in conserving land. And it's something that we're absolutely hoping to do as well as we start to scale. And I think it's just about having that commitment. And I think because of the way that we've built this brand from the beginning, and we have our box of these are the materials that we're willing to work with. These are the parameters that we have to work within. We're never going to change that, just to make a sale. If there's not sustainable material for us to source from, we're not going to make a product. And the rate in which technologies within this industry and in supply chain and recycling of material is accelerating is massive. And I'm getting introduced to new suppliers and new technologies every month. And in 5 years, I can only imagine where we're going to be. And so I'm not terribly scared of running into an issue where we don't have the ability to source sustainable materials.
Wow, that's a great answer. I really appreciate the complexity that you spoke to and the nuance there of we were doing this right from the beginning, and this is the box, this is the pond we're swimming in, and if we keep swimming in that pond, we can scale from this set of what we do.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Eli, is as we start to implement this idea of circularity and we start taking back our product, we now have an input, right? So we don't have to go out and continue to source everything from the planet. There is some aspect, at least as it sits today, the most recycled content, at least for cotton, that you can get into a garment is about 50%. And so you have to have a carrier material, which in our case is usually organic cotton or recycled polyester. We're looking at potentially a recycled cotton hemp blend. But as we implement circularity, we're going to have inputs, right? And so we're going to give that to our mechanical recycler, and they're just going to turn it into new yarn. And so I think that's where we start to get to scale, where if we're getting back thousands or hundreds of thousands of garments every year, and we're giving it to our recycling partner, they're just turning out new yarn and we're not sourcing anything new.
Right. And so in a sense, it actually behooves your bottom line and the core of your vision to actually scale to a place where you're being able to get that kind of return. So that completely makes a ton of sense. And I really appreciate that thought. So it looks like I have a lot more questions written down that students wrote in their assignment, but Joash is here with his hand up. So I'm real curious, and I always love your questions. So maybe you want to share your question with us.
Yeah, I do. Landon, I was reading your interview with Curio, and you made mention of a hoodie that you guys produced that saves 1,197 gallons of water. And yet you also made mention that the finished product is indiscernible between something made traditionally. So really, how do you communicate that sustainability and that entire process in that finished product? Take away the labels, take away everything else. How do you communicate that physically?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's hard to. I think without any communication on our site, you really wouldn't know if you're just touching the garment. And that was actually a goal of ours, right? We wanted to produce product that the customers want and are used to from a quality standpoint and a material standpoint. But we wanted to put the innovation on the back end with the materials that we use that have a much lower impact. So if you have, a traditional cotton hoodie and our hoodie, I don't think you would know the difference. And again, I think that was something that we were actually hoping to achieve. What we do currently, though, is we do have some heat transfers on the inside of the garments that communicate some of the aspects of the garments. Here, give me one sec. I can show you an example. So on the inside of a lot of our garment, or really all of our garments, we have this heat transfer here that talks about the qualities of the garment. So this one has organic cotton, upcycled cotton, recycled polyester, and has water savings that are inherent to this garment. So that's some of the communication that we put on our garments themselves. But, ultimately, I don't think you would know. Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, it's fascinating to see that you're placing that entrepreneurial opportunity of equity in the back end and not necessarily in that finished product. But thank you for your time, Landon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and I'll just
Right.
mention once again for the students on the Zoom, if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and ask that question of Landon. We'd love to hear from you all directly. But I'm sure Eli has more questions kind of in the hopper as well.
I think just one other thing to add to that, and part of Joash's question, I think there is a misconception in the market that sustainable products are inferior. And we're trying to prove that that's not the case. And I think we're doing a damn good job of it, at least with our first round of product. And so, yeah, we wanted to produce a product that the customer is used to, from a feel standpoint, from a fashion standpoint, from a fit standpoint. But again, wanted to innovate on the material level, from what we're sourcing and how we're producing our product to have a much lower environmental and social impact.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so one of the questions that I think is very interesting and comes back to this way that you are thinking about the whole system of your clothing. So I assume there's some answers here, but I'm going to go ahead and ask this question. And I think because it was provocative and I hadn't thought about it, because whatever, I just wouldn't think about these kinds of things. But so the clothes that you're working on, a lot of the clothes that you're working on in the product line are like nice clothes, like clothes that people would wear, to an office. And often those types of clothes require, specialized cleaning. So dry cleaning or things like that. And the question that came up was like, do you produce clothes that require that kind of cleaning on the back end? And, or is that something that you think about in your design process? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. So our goal with our product, especially our first round of product, was to produce the essentials. We do have a number of styles, our wovens, our button-ups that, are a little bit more, I guess, geared towards, formal office, nice night out. But we have a range of, kind of your more casual. We have 4 different types of t-shirts. We have sweatshirts, hoodies. And again, we wanted to produce the essentials, and we wanted to provide the opportunity for someone, as they became aware of the impact that fashion is having on our environment and our communities, and as they wanted to switch, to be able to start to convert their closet, not just, hey, here's a t-shirt or here's a button-up. We wanted kind of a full range of products. So that was kind of the idea, is we wanted to produce essentials. To answer the question about the cleaning, almost all of our products can be cleaned conventionally through a washing machine. The only product that I would not recommend that for is our alpaca sweater. Everything else, and I, obviously have and use all of our product. I wash everything in the washing machine, cold water, and I either lay flat or hang to dry. I do that because, one, it makes the life of the garments last longer by not drying, but also has a lower environmental footprint. When you're using a dryer, there's obviously energy that goes into that. And so that's what we recommend on our site for pretty much all of our garments is wash cold and hang to dry.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that answer. I figured you had a good answer to that question, so
I tried to think about most things, Eli.
yeah, it's real
Yeah,
good.
you sound like you've really put some thought into this. Maybe a little bit of thought. I see a question for one of our students in the chat, and maybe let's see. Annalise says, "What are your thoughts on accessibility of sustainable clothing, as in this case, in terms of price?" Thinking about that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think where we're at currently in the market, it costs more to produce sustainably. There's less supply of the sustainable materials, especially when you go as far as we do from trying to innovate. But actually, in my opinion, what drives price the most is the manufacturer you decide to work with. If you're going to work with ethical manufacturers that certify that they pay a fair wage above living wage, that have fair working conditions, you have to pay more. That being said, we did everything that we could to make this as accessible as possible from a price point perspective. I think that there actually was a decision that I made in the beginning to either go high end, luxury, sustainable goods, or try to make this accessible. And ultimately, to have the largest impact, I think that you do have to make it as accessible as possible. And I think we've done a decent job of it. And, I know that we are not cheap and inexpensive, but I also think that that's something that needs to be taken into account on the consumer level. If you're buying a $10 t-shirt, it's going to act like a $10 t-shirt. And you're going to wear it a couple times before it degrades. And so I think about this concept of cost per wear. We have built our clothing to last for years and years and years, and we produce the staples, the essentials. And so our hope is that when you buy one of our t-shirts, you wear it hundreds of times before it degrades. And so if you start to think about the cost per wear, it's actually probably more cost efficient to purchase a high quality, a little bit more expensive garment that's made in the right way than it is to purchase something from fast fashion and then have to repurchase that after a number of wears.
Okay, so Landon, I'm real curious about this question of wearing clothes out. Like I'm wearing this pair of shorts. I love them. They are shorts from the Boy Scouts of America, and they're cargo shorts. And I don't know how old they are, but they're back from when the Boy Scouts used to have uniforms.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited about these Boy Scout shorts, and I love them. And I've sewed them back together a couple times. They actually have a sort of recurring problem.
Yeah.
But I sew them back up, and I am curious about I'm just curious that this, can we make a quick poll, Sean? I wonder how frequently our students actually wear their clothes out, change clothing out of the wardrobe because it actually gets worn out, as opposed to people moving on from a clothes because they don't like it anymore, or they got a stain on it, or I think there's a lot of reasons people move on from clothing aside from wearing it out. Do you think that's true, or am I just wrong about that? I mean,
Eli, I think you are the exception to the rule. I don't think that a lot of consumers wear clothes until they wear out.
Yeah.
I think it's based on trend, so I think you're the exception, and I think part of our sustainability strategy is producing the essentials.
Right.
things that are always in style.
Mhm.
And you might not wear it every day, but we hope and we believe that our products, from a fashion perspective, are going to be relevant 10 years from now. And that's also part of the sustainability strategy in our product development, and something that I didn't really touch on in our talk. But one of the biggest things that you can do as a consumer is wear your clothes longer.
Mhm.
So yeah,
But-
I always am happy to hear that.
That's so cool.
I
One of
I think that's
one of
Eli
the
and I. That's our strategy, right?
one of the things that we can do right for the planet, right, is wait as long as possible to reproduce, right?
Yep.
So that's another cool strategy. Just wear your clothes as long as possible, wait as long as possible. All these things reduce the generation time of like one part of your life and increase it in the other part. Anyway, it's pretty funny.
It's procrastination. You're
Yeah.
promoting procrastination.
Procrastination works. Procrastination equals sustainability.
All right, Linda, we have a question from Alexandra in the chat, and this is sort of getting to the accessibility in terms of pricing, and just the idea if you or you know of anyone else within the industry who's considered the idea of sliding scale pricing. I mean, it's sort of a different approach to the sort of more standard capitalist notions of how we run a market. But is that anything that you know of that anyone's considered, or is that sort of outside the realm of feasibility?
So I don't know that I fully understand the idea of a sliding scale of pricing. Are you able to?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eli, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah. So like within the, for example, in the small farm community, like we might sell a CSA share or part of a community supported agriculture program, and we might sell that on a sliding scale. So what that would mean is that people who could pay more would pay a little more. I would set the price and say, this is the price for my CSA, but people who couldn't afford it would pay what they could afford, and that would be covered by the people who could afford to pay more and who valued what we're doing so much that they're willing to pay half again what the value of this share is in order to subsidize someone else gaining access to that fresh, healthy local food. So that would be an example of a sliding scale that I've used in the past. And I'm not sure if that's the same idea that Alexandra had, but that's the way I understand the sliding scale.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I, clearly haven't heard of it. I don't know anybody in the industry that is doing that. I think it's an incredibly interesting concept. I would have to figure out, how that would work, and if that would be applicable to the apparel industry.
Yeah.
I think for something like farming, it and what you explained, it makes sense. But I'd have to figure out if that makes sense on an individual product level, which is a relatively small, I guess, investment, right? And the other thing, to think about, and something that I also have to think about, is this still is a business, and I do need to make a profit, and I just want to be a business for good, right? And I want to use my platform and my products and my business to impart some good on this planet, and but I still need to make money so that I can continue to do that and get this message to a larger population. And so, we have to look at margins, and we have to look at what something costs, and at what point and at what price point we can sell it to be able to continue doing business and continue doing good in this world. So thank you for the question. I think it's an incredibly interesting concept, and I will definitely look into it and see if it's something that's applicable. But it's something that I have not seen in the industry.
Yeah. I just, again, I want to mentioned to the students, if you want to ask your questions directly, feel free. I know folks are seeming a little bit shy today, but just going back to the chat, I want to highlight a question from Nicholas about thinking about retail stores versus online direct-to-consumer websites. He asked about your thoughts around the sustainability of one versus the other, and your the approach behind your direct-to-consumer website, for instance. In addition to that, I would like to go back to the idea of producing for the customers directly and sort of shortening that supply chain in a way, and what that means in terms of our perceptions of accessibility and availability, right? Because of course, if you're producing just what people want, then I would imagine that sort of extends out wait times and things like that.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think there's a number of ways to do that. So I'll address the first question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Direct to consumer versus retail. I don't know that I fully know yet. We are predominantly direct to consumer and online right now, and so that's obviously where I have most of my experience. As I think about the future, and our hope is to get into physical retail and open our own stores. We're committed to evaluating everything as we make business decisions, and evaluating it through the lens of our impact. And so if that means efficient lighting, sustainable packaging, we'll have to evaluate it and make the right decisions. But again, because of the way that we're building the company and the culture and our commitment to having the lowest impact possible, we'll have to evaluate that as it comes. And I'm sure that there will be challenges that I'm not thinking about, but we're committed to doing the right thing either way. I can tell you right now with, everything in our direct to consumer business, our packaging is post-consumer recycled. We don't ship any plastic to our customers. Even our shipping labels are post-consumer recycled. Our hang tags are post-consumer recycled. Our labels on our clothing are either recycled or organic. Our buttons on our shirts are Carozzo nuts, so they're natural nuts. They're not plastic. We're trying to think about everything and trying to do it in the right way. And as we go into retail, we will do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then to answer your second question with the on-demand manufacturing, I think there's a number of ways that it can go, and a number of ways to implement it. I think one, and something that we hope to do sooner rather than later, is almost crowdfund styles, where we produce a sample of a potential product, we throw it on our website, and we crowdfund it. If it gets to X amount sales, we'll produce it. If it goes over, great, we'll produce more. But that's how you produce to demand. And so, yeah, there would be a longer wait time in that. I think the other potential benefit of on-demand manufacturing, and as it becomes more prevalent, and as there's more technology that we can implement into the business, with certain styles, we can be relatively confident that if we produce 1,000 of these t-shirts, we're going to sell through them. We have data on the back end to understand kind of where our limit can be. We'll produce on the lower end. And as we see sales coming in and start to be predictive around what's going to happen, we have this material, we can send that to on-demand manufacturing. All right, make 100 more. We have the demand for it. And that way we can replenish inventory without having to go through the typical MOQs of some of the, and MOQ is a minimum order quantity from the manufacturer. And instead of having to just continually repeat and hope that we get it right, we can start to replenish based off data through on-demand manufacturing.
Fantastic. Yeah. I realize we're running short on time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I see that Amy Lynn has her hand up. Maybe we can go ahead and take her question to close things out.
Yeah, just thank you for being here today. I love all that you said about your company so far. I was wondering if you have a marketing plan to appeal to people who don't have sustainability in mind. Because obviously, like people in this class and watching the seminar are probably interested in like sustainability to some degree, but like how do you strike that balance between promoting comfort versus sustainability for your products?
It's a phenomenal question, and I don't know that I have the answer. I think, as we start to build the company, we need to figure that out, and we need to do testing, and we need to see what resonates. I think that we focus pretty heavily right now on our communication around sustainability. I think it's necessary. I think that part of our job as a brand, as we move forward, is we need to educate the consumer, not only on what we do as a brand, but what the issues are within the industry, why it's important to tackle these issues, what we're doing specifically, why it's important, the impact that we can have. So that's why we've been pretty heavily focused around the sustainability, both environmentally and socially. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there needs to be a balance, and we need to find that right balance of quality, style, comfort, and sustainability. I think that sustainability will always be on our message, and it might not be the first message, in some of our marketing campaigns. Some of our marketing campaigns might be geared towards the technical aspects of a certain garment. And then the secondary message will be, oh, by the way, it's sustainable, or, oh, by the way, here's the positive impact that you can have. But just being a new company, and the fact that this is bootstrapped, and quite honestly, we've done zero marketing. We spent $0 on marketing since the pandemic hit, because we needed to survive. And being a small brand that's self-funded with no investment, we just needed to get past this. We're actually actively going through the process of raising money. And as we do that, then we will invest in marketing. And I think it will be a mix of heavy sustainability, and then some that's more geared towards product attributes and quality and comfort and fit and all of that. And I think these days, a lot of that will be and should be done through content, and interesting content. And I think that that's what we're focused on as we raise money and actually get to spend a little bit of money on marketing.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Landon, and really thank you for being with us today. I want to be respectful of everyone's time and realize that we have reached the end of our hour. And so with that, I would just like to say to everyone who's joining us on YouTube, and those of you joining in the Zoom, thank you so much for being with us today and for spending time with us. And thank you, Landon, for joining us. We really do appreciate the time you've taken with us. So
thank you.
Have a good night.
I'd just like to say one thing. One, just thank you for having me here. I am grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for all of you for just being interested in this. I think it's needed. And you guys are the future. So keep up the good work.